I have been to both the American North and the American South, and I can tell you with all of my chest, as a Canadian who has watched this from a safe distance for decades, that these are not two regions of the same country. These are two countries that lost a war and were forced to share a flag. We're getting into that today.
You're listening to Unbound, off script. No outlines, no safety nets, just Beth Curry talking about whatever the hell she wants, or whatever the hell you've asked her to uncover. It's unfiltered, it's unpredictable, and it's officially started. Pull up a chair and don't expect her to stop talking anytime soon. She's a total blabbermouth. Take it away, Beth.
Hey everyone, welcome to Unbound Off Script. This is a midweek episode. This is a listener suggestion that has earned our faithful friend Jim $25 to do whatever the hell he wants to with. If you have any suggestions, you too can get yourself $25 from me, which when converted from my amazing Canadian dollar equates to something like, $123 out of my pocket. You're welcome. But I won't rip on Canada too much today. This is about our friends in Canada's pants. Despite all the drama between our two countries, I still love you guys so much. I love to visit. Nothing will stop me. We must be friends, okay? None of this divided shit. Not even the sweet tea discussion, but we'll get to that. So let me set the scene, okay? You're at a diner, not a restaurant. You're at a diner somewhere in the South. You've been sitting for 4 minutes. Maybe, and the server has already called you honey, asked about your drive, refilled your water without being asked, and told you her daughter just got into nursing school. You didn't ask, right? You don't care, but somehow you're invested now. You want that girl to pass her boards for sure. Now you're at a diner somewhere in the North. You've been sitting for 6 minutes. No one has looked at you. The server drops a menu on the table without making eye contact. You ask for water, and she looks at you like you've just requested a notarized document. Same country, same flag, completely different social contract. I think it's a little weird. As a Canadian, which means I'm technically neutral in all of this, like Switzerland maybe, but with more apologies, I think, I've watched this divide with equal parts fascination and confusion my entire adult life. Okay. Today I want to talk about why, because Jim asked me to, and because I did some digging and I've just kind of found it fascinating, and because the answer is genuinely wild and also a little bit funny. And also, before the end of this episode, I'm going to personally acknowledge all 50 states because every single one of them deserves their moment, even Wyoming. So, quick history. I promise it's not boring. It's probably a little too weird to be boring. When the original colonies were being established, the North and South didn't just develop differently. They were built to be different. The North got Puritan settlers from England who believed that hard work was next to godliness, basically, and leisure was a sin, and fun on Sundays was a moral failing. These are the people who banned Christmas in Massachusetts. I'm not making that up. Christmas banned. The South got colonists from the southwest of England, Devon, Cornwall, the West Country, who had a very different set of priorities: land, horses, hospitality, a good drink. This is right up my alley. The Southern gentry loved fox hunting, horse racing, and dueling, like actual dueling. You offend me, we meet at dawn. Someone dies. The North found this barbaric, obviously. The South found the North insufferably uptight, I guess, and thus began 400 years of mutual confusion. The North industrialized. Factories, cities, immigrants, railheads, all of it. Your value is measured by your output and your speed. The Puritan work ethic. My mouth is getting away from me. This is not right today. It calcified into like this whole regional personality. Direct and efficient, skeptical of small talk, constitutionally unable to just sit there, I guess. The South stayed agricultural, cotton, tobacco, and to the everlasting moral catastrophe of American history, slavery. The plantation system built like this rigid social hierarchy and a culture of land, lineage, and hospitality, and an economy generating massive wealth for a small number of people on the backs of enslaved people who received none of it. That part's not funny at all. And it's important to pay attention to history, especially in these times. This is, though, the foundation and everything else we're talking about today. The warmth, the pace, the pride, the identity, it all kind of grew out of that soil, which was also a place of profound injustice. You can't separate the culture from the history. You shouldn't try. The Civil War ended slavery, but it didn't end the divide. The South lost the war and spent the next 150 years describing it as a strategic pause. As a Canadian, I find this both baffling and completely on brand. The single most observable difference right now between the North and the South is how people treat strangers. In the South, a stranger is just a friend you haven't had a full conversation with yet. But in the North, a stranger is a mild threat who's probably about to ask you for something. Southerners will hold the door for you from 30 feet away. This is what used to happen in Canada. It does not anymore. But this means, you're now obligated to do that awkward half jog so they're not standing there forever. And then you thank them and they say, "Of course, honey." And you feel like you've been briefly adopted by someone's grandmother. It's lovely. In the North, if someone holds a door for you from 30 feet away, they have miscalculated the distance and everyone involved now is embarrassed. Southern communication runs on a very specific operating system that takes time to learn. There are phrases that mean something entirely different from what they sound like. Bless your heart. Sounds like sympathy. It's actually a devastating insult delivered with a smile. It translates roughly to, "You are too stupid for me to be angry at." "We should get together sometime" does not mean you will get together. It means the conversation is over. "I'll pray for you." Depending on tone and eye contact, this is either genuine spiritual warmth or, I guess, a nuclear version of "bless your heart." Northerners say what they mean, sometimes more than what they mean. A New Yorker who tells you that your idea is bad is not being rude. That's intimacy. It's trust. They're giving you real information instead of a casserole and a smile. I, as a Canadian, was trained from birth to say sorry reflexively, so I relate to neither group. I apologize for things I didn't do, and then I feel guilty about the apology. I don't know. There's 3 things I've heard Americans cite most often to explain this divide as well, in this exact order, and I think they're onto something. Guns. So the South is gun country in a way the North simply is not. This isn't just about ownership numbers, it's about cultural relationship, right? In many parts of the South, a gun is not a political statement. It's just a tool or a tradition, sometimes a form of reassurance that goes back generations, You grow up hunting with your father and your grandfather had a shotgun over the doorway. Like, it's not ideology first, it's culture first. In the North, and particularly the urban Northeast, guns are primarily political. You either have one and know it makes other people uncomfortable, or you don't have one and find the whole damn thing alarming. The object is the same, the entire surrounding context is different. God. I said it at the beginning, I'll say it again. The South is the Bible Belt for a reason. Religion is not background noise in the South. It's structural. It shapes the calendar, the community, the politics, and probably a significant portion of the casserole delivery infrastructure. People say, "I'll pray for you," and they mean it. Sunday is still Sunday. Churches are not just buildings, they're the social operating system. In the North, organized religion has been declining for decades. Spirituality exists. The yoga studios are packed and crystals are everywhere and people are doing breath work, but it's largely individual and untethered from community in the same way. Not a value judgment from me. I'm Canadian, If I was into hockey, blasphemous, I know, I would go to the rink on Sundays, but I have my own rituals anyway. Weather. This one is underrated as a culture shaper. So the South is hot, genuinely, relentlessly, oppressively hot for a significant portion of the year. And humidity that makes you feel like you're walking through warm soup is kind of the norm, right? And what does heat do to people? It slows them down. So you sit on a porch because going anywhere is a commitment at that point. You develop a relationship with shade and shade trees, and you eat things that are rich and slow cooked because you had time to cook them that way. The North, though, cold, brutal, bone-aching cold for months that feel like they will never end. And cold makes people move fast and stay inside and value efficiency above almost everything. I'm from Canada. I'm not unfamiliar with cold. I am saying that weather is not just weather. It's a personality formation of sorts. Another interesting thing that I found when digging into this topic is sports tribalism. So that's where North and South find equal footing in their capacity for complete irrationality. And I mean that affectionately, guys. The South has college football, and it's not a sport, it's a civic religion. People plan their lives around it. Marriages have been rescheduled. Funerals have been held at halftime. The Southeastern Conference operates with the social gravity of a small government. Saying the wrong team name in the wrong county is not a neutral act. The North has professional sports and professional sports teams and a specific kind of fan loyalty that is generational and slightly exhausting. A Red Sox fan is not just a person who likes baseball. A Red Sox fan is a person whose grandparents were Red Sox fans, whose children will be Red Sox fans, and who takes the Yankees personally as an ongoing moral failing of the universe. And then there's death. Bear with me here. The North and South handle death differently. The South has a long-ass tradition of elaborate mourning. Community gathering and feeding people through grief. You bring food, lots of food. You sit with family. You tell stories. You may well have an open casket at a church attended by 300 people, many of whom did not know the deceased personally, but knew the family and came anyway, because that's what you do. Funerals are for the living. Death in the South is communal. It's loud in the best way possible. In the North, grief tends to be more private, though. Smaller services, less food infrastructure. The expression of loss is more contained, which doesn't mean it's less deep, it just stays inside the house more. As a Canadian, I find the Southern approach to death genuinely beautiful. That's the way I have dealt with it in my circles. And now I want a casserole. The South runs slower when it comes to work and money and the pace of life. They're not lazy. It's like slower with intention. People sit on porches. I said that, conversations don't have agenda items, and time works differently because it comes in part from a culture where the land set the rhythm of the day, right? You don't rush harvest, so you don't rush dinner, and you don't rush a good story. But the North is a little crazier. They run on urgency, and everyone is going somewhere, and time is money, and money is the point, and stillness is suspicious. Like, walk slowly on a New York City sidewalk, and you will experience this policy enforced socially and immediately by the sound of people sighing behind you. Been there, done that. The South is also cheaper to live in generally, which changes the relationship with money. So when your mortgage is manageable and your cost of living is reasonable, you are less likely to be grinding at the pace of someone whose rent is $4,000 a month in a city that barely notices you exist, right? This is not a small thing. Financial pressure shapes personality. That's been proven. The North has historically had more economic opportunity, particularly in the bigger cities, right? Which is why when you go there, you're hungry and ambitious and 23. Like, that's when you go there. And, after you've made it or burned out, the South starts to look very appealing, probably when you're 53. There's a reason retirees move south, right? It's not just the weather. It's the permission to just slow the hell down, right? Now, because I believe in acknowledging the full picture, I just want to do a brief tour of all 50 states, just a couple of little statements. Think of this as a postcard from someone who's slightly too honest to work in tourism. I'm going to go alphabetically. I think I'm going to start in Alabama, home to the real birthplace of Mardi Gras, which was Mobile, not New Orleans. And Alabama never lets you forget it. Also, Scottsboro has a store that is entirely made up of lost airline luggage, which is either capitalism at its most creative or its most chaotic. Not sure. Alaska. The sun doesn't set for 84 days in parts of the state. 84 days. I don't know what happens to a person after 84 days without darkness, but I suspect that's where some of the personality comes from. I don't know. Vegetables grow massive here because of the 20-hour summer sunlight, including a 138-pound cabbage. Read about that one. I don't know what you do with a 138-pound cabbage. Alaska does. So that's good, I guess. Someone knows. Arizona. It is extremely illegal to cut down a cactus, a specific cactus in Arizona. Even on your own property, even by accident, you can face jail time. The cactus has more legal protection than some workers. And also, everyone's idea of Arizona is it's Arizona tea, which is from New York. Arizona didn't even get credit for its own beverage. Moving on, Arkansas, home to the only active diamond mine in North America where the actual public can dig and keep what they find. Someone once found a 40-carat diamond just walking around. Arkansas doesn't get enough credit for this either. California. I love California. People think I'm crazy, but I think it's because I don't live there. I don't know. I love it. I love visiting. Such a great vibe. I don't know. The highest and lowest points in the contiguous United States are both here and only 85 miles apart. That's California in a sentence. Extremes. Also, it's famously liberal, but also has more registered Republicans than most people realize, and nobody from California agrees on anything about California. Colorado. The term cheeseburger was legally trademarked here in 1935. And of course, there's a monument to this. Colorado invented the cheeseburger, legalized recreational marijuana first among the U.S. states, and has skiing. So Colorado is doing quite well for itself. Next up, Connecticut published the first American phone book and the first American cookbook. Connecticut has been quietly organized and ahead of schedule since 1796. Nobody talks about it enough. Delaware, the first state, technically the oldest, barely 70 miles long and known primarily for being incorporated by every major corporation in America because their tax laws are famously accommodating. Delaware is where all the companies legally live, even the ones that have never set foot there. Florida. I don't have enough time. I love Florida too. Florida Man is not a stereotype. Florida Man is a documentary series, okay? Florida has Disney, alligators, retirees, spring breakers, the weird news, the heat, an election system that has historically needed extra time. Florida is doing everything at once and none of it quietly. Moving on to Georgia, and I'm excited about this one because it actually has my new favorite word, and I chose to put this fact in here so I could say it. Georgia is home to the Okefenokee Swamp, which inspired the comic strip Pogo, whose most famous line was, "We have met the enemy, and he is us." Georgia produced Pogo, Peaches, the CDC, and Tyler Perry. Not a boring state. Moving on to Hawaii. Hawaii has the only official royal palace in the United States, and it had electricity before the White House did. Hawaii was a kingdom. It's now a state. The transition involved a lot of events that Hawaii did not consent to and has not forgotten. Rightly so. Idaho. Idaho harvests approximately 13 billion pounds of potatoes per year. I guess that's what happened there. I got all excited about the potatoes. This is not a typo. 13 billion. Idaho is keeping the world in potatoes and receiving very little gratitude for it. Except for by me. Thank you very much, Idaho. I love you. Illinois. Chicago is one of the most architecturally significant cities in the world and also has an entire personality built around deep dish pizza, which New Yorkers refuse to accept as pizza. This argument has been ongoing for decades and will not be resolved today. I'm personally a fan of Detroit-style pizza. I'm not going to talk about that, though, because we're talking about Chicago and their deep dish, so whatever. Indiana produces more than 20% of the country's popcorn supply. You happy? Also, nobody actually knows what a Hoosier is. Multiple theories exist. One of them involves asking whose ear after a biting incident in a fight. Indiana's fine with not knowing. Okay, I guess I have to leave it at that. Iowa. People mix Iowa up with Idaho and Ohio constantly, which is statistically a problem. For 3 separate states, Iowa has corn, a famous caucus, and a mall with an ice rink that everyone in Iowa has somehow been to. That's great. Can't believe I managed to say all those things without messing my mouth up. Kansas, geographers scientifically confirm that Kansas is literally flatter than a pancake. They brought a pancake from IHOP. They measured, checks out. Kansas has accepted this with remarkable grace. Kentucky has more barrels of bourbon aging than it has people. And I appreciate that. The ratio is both impressive and slightly concerning. Also, a notable number of Kentucky's counties. There's no country in Kentucky. Come on. Kentucky's counties are completely dry, meaning you cannot buy alcohol there, which makes the bourbon surplus situation philosophically complicated, I think. Louisiana, the Lake Pontchartrain Causeway is 24 miles long and crosses open water. Louisiana has Mardi Gras, the best food culture in the entire country that nobody debates. A legal system based on Napoleonic Code rather than English common law because it was French first. And New Orleans, which is its own country inside a state, inside a country. New Orleans has an accent closer to Brooklyn than to Atlanta, which should break your brain a little. Maine, lobster, that's all. Just kidding. The first state in the union to get rid of capital punishment was actually Michigan, but Maine gets credit for a lot of things involving seafood and stoicism and refusing to make a big deal out of anything. Maryland, split personality state. Part of it is basically Southern, genteel, historical, slow, Part of it's an outer suburb of Washington, D.C., which is its own kind of chaos. Maryland gave us Old Bay seasoning, which is on everything in Maryland, including things that don't need it. Massachusetts. When I was young, I called this massive two shits. You don't care. The Puritans banned Christmas here, as I said. They also produced Harvard, the American Revolution, and a particular kind of confidence in their own correctness that has never fully abated. Also, Boston subway passes are named after a fictional guy named Charlie who got stuck in a train. Massachusetts named their transit system after a man who could not exit a train. Do I need to repeat this again? Because I think it's crazy. Michigan, first state to officially abolish capital punishment in 1963, also has more cars per capita than almost anywhere. Detroit has the Great Lakes on three sides, which Michigan residents will tell you about immediately and at length. Michigan has the only state shaped like a mitten, which they use to give directions by pointing to spots on their hand. I think that's pretty interesting. Minnesota has 11,842 lakes. Not 10,000. They've been underselling themselves the entire time. Minnesota is aggressively pleasant, which is its own kind of cultural defense mechanism, I think. Minnesota nice is real. It is also like Southern hospitality, occasionally a way of not actually saying the thing. Mississippi has the most churches per capita in the United States and the highest rates of poverty, which I think says something kind of complicated about the relationship between faith and policy that might be worth sitting with, I just realized. Mississippi has the Mississippi River, which is one of the most historically significant waterways on the planet. And Mississippi is the only way that we can count properly. Missouri, the gateway to the West, as defined by a giant arch. St. Louis has one of the most underrated food scenes in the country and a very strong opinion about toasted ravioli, which is a real thing and is delicious. Missouri has been a swing state in politics for so long it has whiplash. Moving on to Montana. Oh, Montana. Big sky. What a fascinating place. Bigger than Germany, has fewer people than most mid-sized cities. Montana is vast and mostly empty, and the people who live there would prefer it stayed that way. Also has Glacier National Park, which is genuinely one of the most beautiful places on Earth and is unfortunately losing its glaciers. Montana, it's on my short list for moving when we get stuff together here at home and we're trying to pick a place to move to, and Montana is actually on my short list, which is interesting because, Bermuda's on it too. Nebraska, corn, so much corn. Nebraska also has Boys Town and Omaha Steaks and Warren Buffett, so it's doing fine economically. It just also has a lot of corn, if I didn't mention that. Nevada, love it. Las Vegas is not representative of Nevada any more than Times Square is representative of New York, but it's also what everyone thinks of. Nevada has legal brothels outside of Clark County, which you don't hear about as much, but, interesting stuff. And a lot of empty desert that the government has designated for things that nobody talks about. New Hampshire, live free or die is the state motto. That's the actual motto they chose, not live free or have a nice day. Die. I'm told it's on the license plates. New Hampshire committed. New Jersey has more diners per square mile than any other state, more highways than seems reasonable, and has been unfairly maligned for decades. New Jersey has actual greenery. It's not just Newark Airport, okay? People who make fun of New Jersey have never had a real pork roll. Yeah. New Mexico, one of the most geologically and culturally distinct states in the Union. It's more Native American history per square mile than almost anywhere. It has the largest collection of hot air balloons on Earth at its annual festival, which is objectively extraordinary and should be more famous, in my opinion. North Carolina, no. I did New Mexico, so now I have to do New York. New York City contains more than 800 languages. That's not a metropolitan average. That's specifically within the 5 boroughs. New York State outside the city is farms and mountains and small towns that have nothing in common with Manhattan except a tax structure. Now I can do North Carolina if you don't mind. It's produced more American Idol finalists than any other state. 7, which is statistically improbable, but whatever. Silly little facts I'm coming up with today. North Carolina has the Outer Banks, the first flight at Kitty Hawk, and a serious barbecue rivalry between the eastern and western parts of the state that has it's taken completely seriously by everyone involved. So, there's that. North Dakota, interesting, has the world's largest collection of scrap metal sculptures along a stretch of highway called the Enchanted Highway. 7 stops, all enormous, all made of recycled metal. North Dakota decided if you're going to drive through flat open space, it should at least be interesting, and I guess that's how they opted to make it that way. Ohio is where a disturbing number of significant American things happened. The first airplane flight was by Ohio brothers. Neil Armstrong was from Ohio. Dave Grohl is from Ohio. 8 U.S. presidents were from Ohio. Ohio does not get enough credit for its contribution, there goes my mouth, to American history and pop culture, in my opinion. Why can't I not say Ohio? It's like the easiest word ever. Also produces a disproportionate amount of drama in elections, which the rest of the country has opinions about, I guess. Oklahoma has more man-made lakes than any other state, which is a strange thing, but Oklahoma really leans into it. Good for them. Also, it has Tulsa, which had one of the worst racial violence events in American history in 1921, the Greenwood District Massacre, which was not in most American history textbooks until recently. Oklahoma's like me. It contains multitudes. It's a lot. Oregon. Everyone fights over this in my circles. Portland is weird as hell and knows it, and they've built an entire ass brand on it. Portlandia was not a parody. It was journalism. Oregon also, less charitably, was originally founded with explicitly racist exclusion laws barring Black residents, which is part of its history that doesn't make it into the progressive reputation. Pennsylvania has Philadelphia, which has a very specific kind of civic pride built on cheesesteaks. The Eagles, and a long history of being the city that gets underestimated. Also, it has Pittsburgh, which is a completely different city with completely different personality, and Amish country, which is a third thing entirely. Pennsylvania is 3 states pretending to be one, I guess. Rhode Island, the smallest state in the Union, so small that the joke writes itself. But Rhode Island invented coffee milk, which is the state's official drink. And it's exactly what it sounds like. And people from Rhode Island will defend it with their lives. I don't know what it is. I have not been to Rhode Island to have that. So South Carolina has the oldest landscape gardens in North America. It also fired the first shots of the Civil War at Fort Sumter, which is either a historical distinction or something to sit quietly with, depending on who you ask. Let's head on over to South Dakota now, Mount Rushmore, but also the Crazy Horse Memorial, which has been under construction since 1948. Apparently, it's going to be significantly larger than Rushmore and represent a different perspective on whose face gets carved into which mountain. South Dakota contains a real tension between its indigenous history and its American mythology, and that tension is visible in the landscape. Tennessee. I remember Tennessee. I like Tennessee. It has more species of freshwater fish than any other state, I guess, if that matters. Also, it has Nashville, which was country music and is now also a bachelorette party industrial complex. And it has Memphis, which gives us blues and barbecue and Graceland and the Smoky Mountains. Smoky Mountains are transcendingly beautiful. Honestly, Tennessee is legitimately excellent and somewhat underrated outside its musical reputation. Texas. I love Texas too. Texas is not the South. Texas is not the West. Texas is not the Midwest. Texas is just Texas. Okay. And Texas is aware of this and it's structured its entire identity around it. Texas was its own country briefly and has never emotionally recovered from giving that up. Everything is bigger in Texas, as we know. I'm shocked that Big Daddy doesn't live there. Everything's bigger there. Not a joke. It's a structural commitment. Okay. Texas also has the most guns of any state and executes more prisoners than any other state. Texas is hardcore. These facts, which Texans will frame very differently depending on which part of Texas they're from, whatever. Defend your state. I'm down. I like it. I like Texas. It's lovely. It's huge. It takes a long time to get across. Yeah. Utah. I want to go to Moab. I had that on my 40 before 40 list like 20 years ago. And people, when I told them I wanted to go to Moab, looked at me like I had 16 heads, which is fine. I don't care. And now all of a sudden it's a trendy, fun place to be and to go. And everyone wants to go there all of a sudden. Really? Anyway, they have the best snow on earth, according to Utah, which may be true. It's very light, very dry, ideal for skiing. Utah is also largely governed by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which shapes everything from alcohol laws to business culture to the architecture of how communities function. Utah is the second fastest growing state in the country and has been for years. It has a lot going on that the country doesn't fully register. A lot of interesting and strange things. But they have Moab, so it's cool. Vermont, the smallest population of any state except Wyoming. It makes excellent maple syrup. Was technically an independent republic before joining the U.S. Vermont has been progressively left-leaning for decades and is also extremely rural and very white and contains within itself a tension between its roots and its political identity. Also has Ben & Jerry's, which is a reasonable legacy. Except I no longer partake in Ben & Jerry's because I have a personal issue with them, but I'm not going to talk about it. Anyway, Virginia, Northern Virginia is functionally Washington, D.C. The rest of Virginia is in the South. These two Virginias coexist in a state of ongoing mutual bewilderment, I guess. Virginia also has colonial Williamsburg, where people dress up in 18th century clothing and attempt to explain things to tourists who were not fully paying attention on the drive over. Washington has Seattle. I love Seattle. Really did. Visited a few times. Seattle gave us Starbucks and grunge and Amazon and Microsoft, which I guess is an extraordinary output for one mid-sized city over 30 years. Washington State also has Hanford Site, which is one of the most nuclear contaminated places in the Western Hemisphere. They don't often bring that fact up in tourism brochures, do they? Heading back over to West Virginia now, broke away from Virginia because it did not want to secede from the Union. which is a form of breakup that doesn't get told enough in American history. West Virginia is one of the most geologically beautiful states in the country and one of the most economically struggling. And those two things coexist in a way that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Definitely needs more attention. Wisconsin has more bars than grocery stores in some counties, which its residents will tell you is not a problem at all. Cheese. Madison's official city bird is the plastic pink flamingo, declared so after a University of Wisconsin prank in 1979. They chose to make the prank permanent, and I respect that deeply. And Wyoming, another place on the short list, believe it or not, the least populated state in the country, has 2 escalators, both in Casper. The entire state, 2 escalators. Wyoming has Yellowstone and the Grand Tetons and the vast open sky and 2 escalators. And that's enough. 2, it's plenty. Here's what I actually think, having watched all of this from the other side of a border my entire life. The North and South are both convinced they're doing it right. The North thinks efficiency is a virtue. The South thinks hospitality is a virtue. They are both partially correct, which is what makes the whole thing so entertaining and so maddening and frankly so worth paying attention to, right? The real story isn't which is better. It never was. The real story is that the United States has contained from its very beginning multiple distinct cultures operating under one flag. And the ongoing project of being American is the negotiation of what that means. It's been a loud, contentious, sometimes violent, mostly beautiful negotiation. And meanwhile, up in Canada, we've been watching and minding our own business and quietly judging everyone. With love, obviously. Bless your hearts.
And that brings us to the end of another episode of Unbound Off Script. Someone eventually had to pull the plug because, as you know, Beth will happily keep talking until the sun goes down. Thanks for listening, and we will see you whenever she finally runs out of things to say. I'm Rob, she's a blabbermouth, and we're out.